There's a version of you that has spent years trying to make people understand. Years of carefully chosen words, detailed explanations, long messages sent at midnight, trying to untangle what you really meant, trying to prove that you're not what they've decided you are. And somehow, no matter how clearly you explained yourself, it never worked. They didn't understand you any better. They didn't respect you anymore. If anything, the more you explained, the less they believed you. There is a reason for that. And Carl Jung, one of the most penetrating minds ever to study the human psyche, understood exactly what that reason was. What you're about to discover is not about being cold or distant or difficult. It's about something far more important than that. It's about understanding, perhaps for the first time, why your explanations have been costing you something you can never get back. And which 5 types of people, specifically, you need to stop explaining yourself to. Starting today. You were taught that communication solves everything. That if there's a conflict, you sit down, you talk it through, you explain your side, you listen to theirs, and eventually the truth rises to the surface like cream. You were taught that misunderstandings are just a lack of information. That if someone misreads you, the solution is more words, more clarity, more exposure of your inner world to the people who have already decided what to do with it. And because of that, you've spent years locked in a cycle that quietly exhausts you. You over-explain your decisions to people who've already made up their minds about you. You justify your choices to people who will use your justifications against you. You try to be understood by people whose entire psychological infrastructure depends on misunderstanding you. And each time you leave those conversations, something feels slightly diminished. Not just your energy, yourself. But here's the hard truth. Explanation is not neutral. Every time you explain yourself to someone who isn't equipped or willing to receive what you're giving them, you are performing an act of psychological self-erosion. You are handing someone a map to your interior and hoping they'll be kind with it. And when they aren't, you blame yourself for not explaining it better. So you try again. You refine the words. You find a better metaphor. And the cycle continues. Jung observed something that most people never fully absorb. The unconscious doesn't play by the rules of rational discourse. People don't reject your explanations because the explanations are unclear. They reject them because accepting them would require a kind of inner reckoning they are not prepared to make. The problem was never your delivery. The problem is that you were talking to the wrong person. And there were 5 very specific types of wrong person.
The first type is the person who needs you to be small. Most people think that when someone dismisses their explanation, the problem is the explanation itself. They think, if I can just find the right words, frame it differently, come at it from another angle, they'll finally get it. So they keep adjusting, keep softening, keep reshaping themselves to fit into a space that was never designed to hold them. But here is what's actually happening. There is a category of person, and they appear in every life, in every context, whose sense of self is architecturally dependent on your limitation. Not your failure, exactly. Your limitation. Your smallness. Your willingness to stay in a role they've assigned you. When you do something unexpected, succeed in an area they didn't sanction, draw a boundary they didn't anticipate, hold a belief that complicates the story they've built about you, it doesn't just confuse them, it threatens them. At a level below conscious awareness, your growth is experienced as their loss. Jung spent much of his career studying what he called the shadow, the vast unconscious territory in every human being, where everything they cannot accept about themselves gets buried. People who need you to be small are almost always projecting something from their own shadow. They see in your confidence what they've suppressed in themselves. They see in your refusal to shrink what they've never allowed themselves to do. And so they push back. They dismiss. They reinterpret your words until they fit into the version of you that keeps them comfortable. Explaining yourself to this type of person is not a communication problem. It's a power problem.
And more explanation doesn't solve it. More explanation feeds it. Because every time you justify your growth to someone who needs you small, you are implicitly accepting that their judgment of you is the court in which your case will be heard. You are legitimizing their authority over your self-definition, and they will use it. Think about the family member who responds to every piece of good news with a subtle qualifier. The friend who always finds the flaw in the plan. The colleague who nods while you speak and then summarizes your idea in a way that makes it sound naive. You explain further. They nod again. Nothing changes. Because nothing is supposed to change. Your explanation isn't the missing piece. Your silence would be there. The shift is this. The next time you feel the compulsion to justify a decision or achievement to someone who consistently makes you feel smaller for having it, stop mid-sentence in your head and ask yourself, am I explaining or am I auditing for approval? If it's the latter, close the door. Not with drama, with quiet finality. Because silence in the right moment is not a retreat. It is a declaration. And it leads directly into the second type of person, someone far more dangerous, because they wear the mask of concern. The second type is the person who collects your vulnerabilities. Most people believe that sharing honestly is how you build trust. And that is true, with the right people. What they don't tell you is that the same openness that builds trust with one kind of person builds leverage for another. There is a type of person who listens to you with remarkable attentiveness. They ask the right questions. They seem genuinely interested in understanding you. They lean in, and you feel seen, which is one of the most powerful feelings a human being can experience. So you tell them more. You explain your fears, your doubts, the reasoning behind a difficult choice, the wound underneath a particular reaction. And they receive all of it with warmth and nod and say, I understand. And they do understand. Perfectly. What they do with that understanding is the problem. Machiavelli, writing in a world where political survival depended on reading people with surgical accuracy, observed something that applies far beyond the courts of Renaissance Italy. He understood that information is power.
And that people who smile while they gather it are the most dangerous of all.
The person who makes you feel safe enough to explain yourself completely has not necessarily earned that safety. Some people create intimacy the way a spider creates a web, not as a home, but as a trap. This isn't paranoia. This is pattern recognition. And the pattern looks like this. You confide something vulnerable, and weeks later, in a group setting, in a moment of friction, that vulnerability reappears. Not as a weapon, exactly. More like a gentle reminder, a knowing reference, a comment framed as concern that just happens to expose the softest part of you to the room. And you realize, slowly, that what felt like a conversation was actually an inventory.
Jung observed that people who have not done their own inner work, who have not confronted their own pain, their own desires for power, their own capacity for manipulation, do not always do harmful things consciously. The shadow acts without announcing itself. Someone can genuinely like you and still use what you've given them in ways that serve their unconscious need for control or superiority. Their warmth was real, and so was the harvest. The practical shift here is one of calibration, not closure. You don't need to become guarded with everyone. You need to track the gap between what someone says and what they do, between how they treat your disclosures privately and how they handle them when stakes are higher. Trust is not given. It's earned through behavioral evidence, repeated over time.
Stop explaining your interior to people who haven't yet shown you what they'll do with it. And if you think this second type is unsettling, wait until you meet the third. Because the third type doesn't need your vulnerabilities. They've already decided who you are. And no amount of evidence will change that. The third type is the person whose identity requires a fixed version of you. This is the most common one, and it is almost certainly active in at least one relationship in your life right now. Most people think that if they just explain their change, their growth, their new perspective, the ways they've healed or shifted or become more themselves, the people who knew them before will update their understanding. That the old image will be replaced with the new reality. That people fundamentally want to see you accurately. But here's the harder truth. Some people do not know who they are without knowing who you are. Their self-concept is partially constructed from the contrast with yours. You are the irresponsible one, so they can be the responsible one. You are the sensitive one, so they can be the rational one. You are the one who struggles, so they can be the one who has it together. And when you stop fitting that role, when you heal from something they assumed was permanent, when you succeed in an area they categorized as beyond you, when you simply refuse to be the fixed point in their constellation, it doesn't just confuse them, it destabilizes them. Nietzsche wrote with fierce clarity about what he called ressentiment, the deep, corrosive resentment born in people who have transferred the locus of their identity entirely onto external comparison. When someone who has built their self-image through comparison with you is confronted with your growth, they do not celebrate. They reorganize. They find new evidence for the old narrative. They revisit old stories. They recategorize your wins as flukes and your changes as phases. And they will ask you, sincerely or subtly, to explain yourself. Not because they want to understand, but because the explanation gives them material to work with. Think about the ex-partner who, years after the relationship ended, still speaks about you as though you are the same person you were then. The parent who introduces you to friends using an identity you shed a decade ago. The old friend group where, no matter how much you've grown, you always end up reverting to who you were at 19. You've explained. You've shown them the evidence. You've narrated your journey with patience and care. And yet, the image persists. Because your explanation was never the missing piece. What was missing was their willingness to let you change. Which, for them,
would require changing too. The shift is stark, but necessary. Stop narrating your evolution to people who are invested in your stagnation. You do not owe anyone a running commentary on who you are becoming. Your transformation is demonstrated in the fabric of your actions over time. It is not proven in a conversation. The moment you begin justifying your growth to someone who needs you to stay the same, you have stepped into a courtroom where the verdict was decided before you entered. Show. Don't explain. And when you've mastered that shift, you're ready to deal with the fourth type. The one who, unlike the others, doesn't need you to be small or vulnerable or static. They need something more insidious. They need to win.
The fourth type is the person who experiences all conversation as competition. Most people think it's a habit, a social skill they never developed, something you can fix with patience and better phrasing. It isn't. It's a psychological orientation. There is a type of person for whom every interaction is, at the unconscious level, a contest. Because somewhere in their development, the world taught them that worth is finite. That if you are impressive, they are diminished. That understanding you fully would require them to briefly become you. And that feels like annihilation. Alan Watts understood this. He observed that the ego, the identity built through differentiation and defense, experiences genuine understanding of another as a kind of dissolution. And for a person who has built their entire sense of self on not being you, that is an act they cannot perform. When you explain yourself to this type of person, You are not entering a dialogue. You are entering a debate they entered before you arrived. Your explanation becomes their opening argument. Your vulnerability becomes their leverage. Your nuance becomes the thing they simplify in order to dismantle. You've seen this on social media. You post something honest. Someone extracts the one phrase that can be made to look foolish. You explain. They reply louder. You explain more. You are now in a loop that has no exit. Because the loop is the point. The point is never understanding. The point is dominance. Ask yourself before you explain, is this person trying to understand me or trying to beat me?
If the answer is the latter, every word you offer is ammunition. The only winning move is the one that looks like losing. Walking away. Not in anger, in clarity. The person who needs to win a conversation is not someone you can educate. They are someone you can only outlast.
The fifth type is the person you explain yourself to because you haven't yet explained yourself to yourself. This one is the hardest to accept because it isn't about them at all. Jung was relentless on this point. What we cannot tolerate within ourselves, we project outward. The desperate need to be seen accurately by others is often a signal that you have not yet done the work of seeing yourself accurately. When you are truly grounded in your own self-knowledge, the misperceptions of others lose most of their sting. You don't need to correct them, because their version of you and your knowledge of yourself occupy entirely separate chambers, and one does not threaten the other. But when there is an unresolved question inside you, when part of you suspects the accuser might be onto something, then you explain, over and over. Not to convince them, to convince yourself. Schopenhauer understood this with cold precision. You believe you're explaining to clarify. You are often explaining to reassure. You need yourself to believe that you are understandable, that you are coherent, that you make sense. And because that reassurance cannot come from outside you, no explanation ever satisfies it. So you try again. The shift is the most demanding of all five. The next time you feel the compulsion to explain, stop. Not to be silent with them.
To be honest with yourself. Ask, do I actually believe in this choice? Have I looked at this part of myself clearly? Or am I asking them to validate what I haven't yet validated internally? A therapist might help you answer that. A journal might. A long, honest walk might. But the person you're trying to explain yourself to, they cannot give you what you're actually looking for.
So let's bring all five together. The first type needs you small. Guard your narrative. Not out of pride, out of self-respect. The second type collects what you give them. Warmth is not proof of safety. Let behavior earn the depth of your disclosure. The third type has a fixed image of you. Your transformation speaks for itself. Let it. The fourth type is in a contest. Recognize the arena early. Remove yourself from the game entirely. The fifth type is yourself. That inner work is the real one. Everything else is distraction from it. None of this happens overnight. Real transformation never does. You will slip back into the old pattern. You will feel the pull of the explanation. That's human. That's not a failure. What matters is how quickly you catch it. What you're building, slowly and steadily, is a kind of psychological sovereignty. A relationship with yourself so honest and so stable that the misperceptions of others, even the ones you love, can no longer move the floor beneath you. You need to know, in the mirror of the thing, that the most profound form of communication available to you is not explanation.
is not explanation. It is the steady, quiet, undeniable evidence of who you are. Over time, in every room you walk into, without a single word of justification. Now go be that.